The facade of the modern democracy. We don't live in a democracy. We never have, and we never will. To explain why we don't live in a democracy, I have to first define the word for obvious reasons. Democracy comes from the Greek word demokratia, which is composed of the words demos, people, and kratos, rule, ruling by the people. Essentially, the people decide what the rules of its society are and what actions are undertaken, what laws are passed, and so forth. This has never been true, however, and it never will be, and I'll explain why. One of the big problems in a democracy is the issue of representation according to population size. This issue is extremely simple to understand. Say you're in a room with 10 other people. It's easy to listen to all of the opinions, take them into consideration simply by the fact that it is so few of them. The bigger this room becomes and the more people are included, the more difficult it is to accurately represent them. In most modern parliaments, people are supposed to be represented by one, two, or three chambers that vote on laws and policies, and these are usually 50 to 300 members each. As you can imagine, having 50 people represent 1,000 people is a lot easier than having them represent 300 million people, for example. There are simply too many groups at that point to accurately represent the people, even if the system did actually represent the people, which it usually doesn't. This is a well-known issue that many have studied. I will put a link in the description. First, we have to discuss the decision-making process and the rationality of the average voter. A large majority of people are bad at making decisions, even when it comes to simple ones that directly benefit them. This is a well-established fact. People are not rational and will decide to vote based on largely arbitrary reasons. I voted for person X because he seems like a nice guy I could have a beer with is a common sentiment among voters, unfortunately. Or I don't like Y politician because he or she didn't support so and so sports team. Even when they try to be rational, they lack the in depth knowledge about certain topics to make an educated decision in their best interest. Let's say a political issue arises regarding rapidly increasing crime statistics, for example. Even top criminologists have no blanket solution for such a thing. How would you expect a layman to make the best decision in such a case? It's impossible, and they won't. Neither will the average person spend a lot of time studying a topic in depth before making a decision, and even if they did, they have limited time and access to information, so they are in no way going to come to the best conclusion they could possibly get to regarding the solution to a perceived problem. Few people take the time to truly familiarize themselves with a subject to form their own opinion on it. At best, they read a couple of news articles or listen to a talk show. A lot of people will instead listen to what they think are experts or just the media and influential people like their favorite celebrities. This is also heavily flawed, of course, because as in any field, there are very few things experts can generally agree on, and there is a lot of debate. Picking the right expert is therefore also prone to bias, as many problems don't have a simple right and wrong answer. Instead, there are varying shades of gray with different solutions, providing different answers which may or may not be optimal for specific people or groups. When I talk about experts in this context, I mostly mean political experts, not scientists, because the science part of certain things is less politicized. But it still happens. Everything is political, especially these days. Manipulation. Furthermore, in a democracy, what's most important is controlling the public narrative and public opinion. We've established that people don't vote rationally, so it is easy to manipulate them. Consider making crime a big issue, something your favorite candidate wins on, and you can spin the narrative. Sociologist Edward Bernays talks extensively in his books about this, and I highly recommend these, especially the ones about propaganda and influencing public opinion. He is also a driving force behind first wave feminism, which was just a ploy for corporations to expand the workforce and lower the cost of labor, which they did so very successfully. Representation in democracies. Even if all voters were perfectly rational and voted in their best interest, there is another layer of problems. The election candidates are unlikely to accurately represent the opinions of the people on many issues. Take the issue of supporting the Ukraine war. Some people think too much is spent, some think not enough, others don't want to support them entirely. No effort is made to find out the exact amount of support voters would deem justified. This is just one example, but to put it bluntly, there's a limited number of parties, and most of them will not represent voters' highly specific beliefs. So voters already have to compromise and vote for parties that align with some of their beliefs, even if they disagree with others. This compromise is already inherently anti-democratic. Politicians themselves are another problem. Everyone knows about this problem. A politician promises one thing and does something else entirely. So again, even if the perfect candidate gets into power, chances are that they will largely fail to deliver on their promises. It's not entirely their own fault because they're liars. Most countries have laws and bills that go through chambers, like I explained earlier, where other representatives vote on them, and they can be wildly different from the opinions of the actual voters, despite being representative. Furthermore, many policies are short sighted. Election cycles vary from 4 to 6 years in most democracies, so anything they want to change has to have a noticeable, immediate effect. A good policy that takes 10 years is too slow to make a difference that can be credited to them, and as such is not a very good political strategy. Another huge issue is, of course, bribery, or as many countries like to call it, lobbying. There are people who politicians and the government at large do listen to, people who bribe them. Of course, you could also call them donators. Whether or not you're in the EU, USA, South Africa, Asia, no matter where, all politicians are prone to lobbying. It happens everywhere. The government and big corporations are in bed together. Corporations push through laws that make it harder for competition in their field or make things more beneficial to them. Some examples include immigration, which is currently a hot issue in most Western countries. Corporations benefit from this because more people in the potential labor force lowers the prices of workers. This is simple economics. They don't care about the well-being of these people or any consequences other than that, as they are exploiters. These organizations control the democratic process on multiple levels, one of which is the fact that they provide a budget for elections. Theoretically, in most countries, everyone over a certain age can run for president, prime minister, or any other position. But without political support, and especially, and perhaps more importantly, large donations that fund one's campaign, your chances are as good as zero to succeed or become elected. Because these companies control the budget, they all decide who the populace gets to choose from. While large corporations might disagree over many things, they can all agree on a lot of things as well. And that is that they all hate taxes, want cheap labor, and want to remain in control. So a candidate who breaks that status quo is unlikely to get nominated, and even if they were to get nominated, it's extremely unlikely that they would actually deliver on such populist promises. Furthermore, oftentimes people from certain powerful organizations end up working for the government later on. Many people see lobbying or bribery as an unfortunate side effect of the system, but that is not the case. In capitalism, it is a feature of the system. It neatly provides the most power to those who control the most capital, so they can rig the system in their favor. Of course, it gets even worse. Countries have pacts with other countries that they also base their laws and policies on. For example, in order to trade with a country might need to adopt certain policies. Some of these are reasonable. For example, to trade with the European Union, a country may not be allowed to use slavery in the production of their goods. Others can be more radical, where countries prohibit certain things in countries or face sanctions. Regardless of what people want, the other nation is exerting control over them, and this is inherently undemocratic. Whether or not you agree with the policies they push or not, I will link this in the description. There's also organizational influence. There's many large organizations who strongly influence the laws and politicians of other nations. The WEF, World Bank, International Monetary Funds, among many, many others, all have strong influences. For example, they provide loans to countries, but at the same time force these countries to adopt certain policies. Whether or not those policies are good or not, it's entirely undemocratic, as none of the people in these organizations are democratically elected, and they likely have their own best interests in mind. You can't rely on them doing anything else. They are a business. Well, they function like a business. As they exert a lot of power through their funding, they exert a lot of control over other nations as well. In conclusion on democracy, in essence, I can't think of a democratic system currently in existence that even begins to resemble the actual thing that it means. For better or worse, we are truly governed by a small group of powerful individuals who pull the strings from the shadows and never have to face any responsibility for the decisions they make thanks to the sham democratic system. They will never be held accountable, instead, politicians and representatives or the voter are. Furthermore, this system perfectly divides people. Divide and conquer is a saying that holds true to this day, and politics can be very divisive. I suspect the increased global polarization is not a happy accident, but rather intentionally propagated. Next, I will discuss some solutions or other options. I don't think this is all bad per se. If we lived in a true democracy, or even just something more strongly resembling the word democracy, the consequences would likely be disastrous. The average person, or a large majority of people, simply aren't capable of making good decisions to lead a country. But I will say that it is very tiring to have everyone play a game of pretend democracy, and if you don't play along, people get upset. It would be more relaxing if they just gave up the charade. I'd be a lot happier if I could have a discussion about something without some idiots trying to categorize everything into political parties rather than looking at the arguments. Furthermore, I think many of us are tired of the constant politicization of everything: memes, games, Hollywood, you name it. Everything has to be strongly and in your face political now. It's not even subtle anymore. But on the other hand, even though it's only a minuscule amount, the fact that they go through this entire charade to make it look like people's opinion matters shows that they care at least a teeny tiny bit about what the public thinks. Alternative options. I don't think other options are necessarily better for governing a nation. Democracy, through democratic rule, doesn't work at all, not even in theory. That is to say, it will never have the interests of the people in mind. Communism works perfectly in theory, but in reality it is never going to work meaningfully better than our current democratic systems. It has tremendous flaws, and again, I'd like to emphasize it could never work in our world. People are simply too corrupt. Monarchy provides stability and longer-term thinking to a nation, but ultimately, the selection process for a monarch is ridiculous at best, and besides, monarchs have always been puppets anyway, except instead of using big business to truly govern them, they were controlled by nobles. Personally, I've always liked the idea of a technocracy, but I recognize its many, many flaws, many of which are the exact same as the ones I already mentioned in this video. The fact that if a system can be corrupted, the fact is, if a system can be corrupted, it will be corrupted. So it doesn't matter what sort of system we invent as long as people who abuse it don't get punished. And that will absolutely never happen. At the end of the day, these systems just exist for the powerful to remain in power, and they serve their main purpose. Thank you for watching my video to the end. If you have any questions or other things you'd like to add, please leave them in the comments below. And also, I would appreciate it if you could give it a like if you enjoyed any part of this video. Thank you very much. Goodbye.